welcome. You are listening to another episode of the Business of Aesthetics podcast series, brought to you by our gold sponsors, MRP, Laser Up Tech, and Equa Marketing. We also want to thank our silver sponsors, Lendiala, Eilis Works, and Pronox. If you would like to network and share your experience with our podcast guests and other aesthetic industry professionals, join our Facebook or LinkedIn communities by searching for Business of Aesthetics. Today we're going to be speaking with one of the finest experts in aesthetics.
Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of the Business of Aesthetics podcast. We are thrilled to have an amazing guest with us tonight, Dr. Lauren Umstattd. Dr. Umstattd comes to us from Leawood, Kansas now, although has moved around the Midwest a little bit. Dr. Umstattd, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. I'm a big fan of your podcast and have learned little things here and there from, the resources and education that you put out. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you. And thanks for being a part of our community, and thanks for wanting to share with the community. I think this is how we all continue to get better and better. Do you want to, or will you, for the benefit of some of the guests that, or some of our community members that don't know you, go through your journey a little bit? I mean, beyond being probably one of the few women plastic surgeons in the Midwest, I think that's still, I hate to say that it's still emerging to see women plastic surgeons, but I still think that it is. But start with like maybe when you decided you wanted to get into plastics, and then how you ended up in Leawood, Kansas.
So I did a residency in ENT, or the fancy name, long name is Otolaryngology, head and neck surgery. And I found that head and neck surgery is more of a descriptive name for that 5-year training. Initially, when I decided to do ENT, I just loved the complexity of the head and neck anatomy. I didn't really know what I wanted to do long term. And then during residency, the world of ENT is pretty vast. You do cosmetic stuff, obviously, like rhinoplasty, facelift, neck contouring, chin implants. You also do a wide range of malignancies, cancers of the head and neck, like big reconstructive cases. You do lots of kids, lots of adults, endoscopic stuff. Like there's a huge breadth of surgical stuff within that world. And in our 4th year of residency, we were assigned to a satellite location for 1 month where we just did cosmetics. And I was like, okay, this is it. I found what I want to do for the rest of my life. I loved the patients. I loved the follow-up. I loved the procedures. I loved the cosmetic world, like every aspect of it. I also loved the complementary non-surgical side of things with like skincare and Botox and filler. And so at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to do a fellowship in facial plastic and reconstructive surgery. So I did a 5-year residency and then a 1-year fellowship. And then out of fellowship, I decided to open my own practice. But early on when I decided I wanted to do cosmetic surgery, so towards the end of residency, I started thinking like, how do I want to shape my practice? I really didn't love working for a big hospital. I didn't want to join a big group. I wanted to do things my way, and I wanted to have a lot of autonomy in that. And so I started talking to my husband about, hey, let's maybe think about opening my own practice or buying a practice. And so I pretty much made that decision like 2 or 3 years before we actually opened. During fellowship, that whole year was essentially spent building my practice from the ground up. There's a lot of options when it comes to going solo. As a surgeon, you can buy a practice from an older, soon to retire surgeon. I kind of looked into that and didn't find a great option in the geographic area that I wanted to be in. I'm from Kansas City originally. My parents are here, my sister's here, my husband's from an area just near here. So we always knew we wanted to be in the greater Kansas City area. And so after that option was crossed out, I was like, okay, well, let's look at buildings that exist and see about renovating something. And then you kind of have to make the decision, well, do you want just a clinic or do you want a clinic and a surgery center? And in the realm of autonomy, especially being a female and having young children, I want to have total control of my schedule. And so I was like, okay, well, it's a bigger investment up front and arguably way more complex. But I think in the long run, if I go ahead and make the investment into an ambulatory surgery center, I'll be happier. And so it turned out to be really hard in the state of Kansas to renovate a building and still be able to meet all the state requirements for an ASC. So then we graduated to the decision to look for land and just build something de novo. And so that's what we did. We ended up working with a commercial realtor, finding some land in a part of the greater Kansas City area that we liked. And then we interviewed architects and told them what we wanted and what the dream was, mainly me, but then also my husband as like a partner slash advisor, mentor, investor. And then after that, we found a contractor and we graduated to city permits and then broke ground. And it took about 14 months from breaking ground to opening our doors to the public.
Where were you practicing in that time?
Nowhere.
Oh, so you were just working on the new, so you were in between finishing your residency, your fellowship program, and opening up your own.
Yeah.
So you weren't seeing patients so much. You were the general contractor of this facility.
Yeah, that 14-month period overlapped with my fellowship. And then there were a few months where I wasn't really practicing in the traditional sense. I had our second baby, which was great because I had some time to do that and recover and everything. And then since I did everything myself and didn't have a partner, I didn't have a consultant, I did everything. I ordered all the equipment, I hired all the staff, I created all of our training. I interviewed all the EMR companies, I interviewed all the IT companies, like every single component of this place I did. So it was basically a full-time job. But no, I was not seeing patients for a few months there, which really ended up being great because I was able to dedicate 100% of my time to this place.
Yeah, and your new baby, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's really neat. Is there anything in that process you regret? Like not finding the land or not sticking with the building, or, I mean, it just, it was a lot to take on.
Yeah, it was. I don't think there's anything overt that I regret. I think about halfway through that 2-year process, I started to recognize that I could not use my medical surgical brain for business stuff. So in medicine and surgery, you have to be fairly exact. There's very little margin for error. And so you really have to contemplate your decisions. You have to really make sure that you're being decisive and deliberate about everything. Whereas in business, I try to take a different mentality. You have to go fairly quick. You have to make decisions if you want to grow. And so I have my business brain where I accept a larger margin of error and I have to go quicker. I can't think as much about every little decision as with patient care. So I would say about halfway through that whole process, I realized that, wow, I really have to separate these two things in my head and not treat my business like a patient, because that will prohibit me from growing.
Mm-hmm. That standard of perfection that many plastics have is not only attainable on the surgery in the OR, but it's definitely not attainable when you have other people involved. And I agree with you. I'm a big proponent of like, let's try it and see what happens, but I'm always willing to pivot, and I'm willing to pivot quickly. I'm willing to admit that I was wrong. This didn't work the way that I wanted. But a lot of times you really can fit a round peg in a square hole if you work it a little bit. And sometimes that's what's required.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of my advantages in terms of getting this place up and going is that I don't always try to fit the round peg in the round hole. I think there's a lot of room for disruption in our industry. And, you know, you pointed to me being a woman, and I think it's really given me a distinct advantage. I think men and women just kind of have different approaches to things, different styles of communication, if we're stereotypical about things.
Yep.
And so I think we try to approach things a little differently as a practice and, you know, as a team. And I think that's really helped us grow in our community.
And certainly differentiate, because that every patients really want to go with someone that they like and they trust, and maybe they seem familiar to them. Maybe it's another mom with 2 kids and, you know, can relate to you that way and doesn't relate to the 68-year-old, you know, surgeon that's been doing this for 30 years in your community or whatever. So I what a great way to differentiate. And it's really just being true to yourself as well. It's funny though to hear you say when you went through your story is like, and then, you know, we couldn't, and I couldn't find another place. So we thought maybe I'll renovate a place. And then I couldn't find something to renovate. So I thought maybe I'll buy the land. It reminded me like, you know, when you first get married, they say like life's biggest decisions, buying a house, having a kid, getting married. I can't remember, the moving is another big one. Like these are huge milestones in your life, and they say try not to do too many of them at the same time. And here in your professional side is like you had the kids, built the baby, you know, did it all at the same time, and you managed through.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot at one time, but I have a great spouse and we've got a great support system. And I just kind of recognized that every day was going to be a little bit of a challenge. And so I think if you go in with the right mindset, we're really capable of a lot more than we think we can do.
Is your spouse involved in your business on a day-to-day basis?
He doesn't work for me per se. He's not like on payroll, but yes, he is a huge help to me. He helps me brainstorm in terms of marketing, staff development. He's in the restaurant world. And
okay, but he has another job.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, when you first started, I want to get back to the funding piece because it must be outrageous, especially when you throw a ASC in there. But staff wise, who did you start with and like win in the process? I'm guessing some of your staff didn't come on until you started to have clients, but maybe some came a little earlier. Right? There's kind of an evolution. Like, who was your first, I don't know, 3 hires?
When we opened my doors, I had 2 full-time employees and 1 contracted person. The 2 full-time employees were a patient care coordinator and an RN. And I had a contracted anesthesiologist for cases. And so I knew that we were slightly overstaffed at that point. But the great thing about an RN is that they can really do anything. I have to have an RN in my ASC. And then she can also help room people, answer phones, make follow-up appointments, etc. We're now 8 months in. I still have a contracted anesthesiologist, the same RN and patient care coordinator. I've since hired another full-time nurse, and we have a part-time front desk coordinator. So we have almost doubled our size in 8 months. And I heard something years ago, and I can't remember who said it, but they said the minute that you miss 1 phone call, it's the time to hire another full-time employee. Because in our industry, especially as a surgeon, one missed phone call could be one missed surgery. And that pays almost a whole salary in a year. And so I think in terms of business, but then also staff retention, I want people to feel somewhat relaxed at work. I don't want to work them to death. I want them to feel like they've got good support from me. And so I want there to be some cushion with the staff. I want people to I have unlimited PTO. We have a maternity leave policy, all of that stuff. I want people to be able to leave, take time off, get away from work. And the remainder of the team doesn't feel totally pressured when we have one person gone.
Right. That Noah's Ark, right? There's someone there to be able to handle that other part of the job. And that type of hiring and I guess righteous structure of business, maybe it's we should just call it the right fair, being responsible. And what a responsibility it is, and a burden to take care of employees. I think if you don't have employees, you'll never really understand how that concept of, getting paid last. But in your case, you mentioned cushion. So I want to get back to the financial piece of things here, because I'm just thinking on gross numbers, just kind of publicly, numbers, you may have $500,000 in school, or maybe there's some less than that, but a lot of money tied up in school. Then you have probably another $500,000 in tenant improvement, and then you have $1 million in a accredited surgery center. So how did you get started? Like you're in school, you're doing this fellowship. Fellowship's not paying you big money. And then, so how do you do it?
So I don't own the building, which was a huge help. So my husband is in a different world, industry, restaurants and property. So his property company owns the building and I am a tenant. I will hopefully be their one and only tenant forever. So I pay rent.
But so they built the building.
They built the building. And so I had the best of both worlds. I got to design the entire thing. And I didn't have to because we personally, him and I don't have the leverage to take out that big of a loan. His property company does. So I'm a tenant there. I did take out a business line of credit to get going. So we didn't put any personal finances into the building. I went to the bank and I said, here's my plan. And I think if month one, I see 5 to 10 patients, that will turn into 12 to 15 patients, will turn into 20 to 50 patients. And so I got very granular with, this is how I'm going to start. And here's my marketing plan. And I think within a year, this is how many patients I can see per month. I broke it down by toxin versus filler versus surgery. And the bank approved a line of credit for $250,000 to get me going. I ended up taking out an additional $50,000. So I had a $300,000 line of credit to get going. I've used almost all of that. And we started breaking that threshold of not running in the red at about 6 months into practice. So I don't think I'll have to take out any more money, at least in the short term. And I'm set to start paying back that line of credit in a few months. And then our personal finances, I have debt from medical school, but my husband has an income. I don't pay myself right now, but that's okay. We live fairly modestly, and so I don't need to pay myself. I'd rather put all that back into the business, and I'm very fortunate in that way.
Yeah, and what a great investment in the business. I think that sweat equity that you're putting into the business is in lieu of what somebody else may need, a partner, or go to work with somebody existing, or borrow more money from the bank. Even just on equipment alone. So on equipment, did you have separate equipment financing, separate of the line of credit?
No.
No. So that's, yeah, even on the equipment, I would think that just staff alone would eat up. I mean, $250,000 just goes quickly when you're looking at feeding 5, 6 staff members, and then health insurance and payroll tax and social security and all the other things
Yeah.
that go along with that.
Yeah, my monthly expenses are a lot, and it's a little bit interesting hearing from patients, they'll be like, well, why is your Botox more than the lady down the street? It's like, well, I just can't compare. We're just a different breed of a practice. Very realistically, my overhead is a lot higher. I'm also trained differently. I'm a surgeon. I don't come from a nursing background. And so we have a very high overhead. But surgery is the greatest ROI there is. I mean, I make way more money on a surgical case than I do the non-invasive stuff in clinic. So.
Yeah, I would agree, depending. I mean, at some point, I've seen fractional CO2, bring in the 3,000 hours an hour, something around that range, which I think gets into surgery, dollars, equivalent surgery dollars. Yeah, I mean, terribly expensive, all of it. And that patient, I just had this discussion at our own practice with our physician and some of our staff was, we know we're not the cheapest when it comes to Botox, but one of the things we tasked our team to ask patients looking for price, calling and saying, I'm just shopping price. We would say, is price the most important thing to you? Or are you also looking for XYZ? If they say no, price is the most important to us, then we say we're not going to be the lowest price. I can promise you. So, and we let that patient go.
I think that's a great point. And one thing that I try to encourage my staff to do when patients call or text in about pricing is it allows us to educate the patient a little bit, or potential patient, on what all we include in our price. My first consult with people is a full 1 hour. That's very different than most practices. Surgically, I'm also different. I include everything in their surgery cost. Me, the anesthesiologist, the surgery center, all their post-op supplies, everything's bundled together. I try to make it as simple and as patient-centered. We give you everything that you need. Because I think the industry is somewhat lacking in that, especially if you go outside of aesthetics and cosmetics and you go to like regular healthcare. Everything is piecemealed. If you go for a functional surgery, if you get your gallbladder taken out, you get like 10 bills in the mail afterwards.
Yeah, it's really hard. I think that's hard for a patient to navigate, and that's one of those things. So we started talking about market differentiation, and that is certainly a way to differentiate yourself. You're spending more time with the patient. You have a much more boutique approach to, I want to say like a VIP patient approach. You haven't stuffed your reception room full of patients yet, because you're still on this growth track. So it sounds like you're really taking advantage of the time that you have with those patients right now.
Yeah, and I think there's so many touch points with patients that I try to keep a consistent message, feel, brand. So from when they first start researching us, I try to put everything out online. I try to put all these educational videos out across different platforms so that by the time they get to me, they already kind of know what they're going to get. They have a sense of who I am, what our team is. And then when they come in, it's all about them. I've coached my team that when a brand new patient walks in, it's not, do you have an appointment or what's your name? It's, thank you so much for coming in. Do you happen to be Jane? Because Jane has an appointment in 10 minutes. Who's walking in the door here? So, and then we have even the small things. I mean, we offer patients drinks, snacks. We have a gorgeous office when you walk in. There's not a bunch of like flyers and pamphlets. I think that really takes away from the patient experience. We take dedicated photos of every single patient. And then I spend a lot of time with every patient, educating them. I tell them the injections, if they're coming in for the simplest thing, which would be like Botox, really the injections are the easy part. It's trying to get out of the patient, what are your areas of concern? What have you had in the past? What did you like? What did you not like? Talking about the risks, talking about the follow-up, talking about, how the drug works, and that tomorrow you're going to have the same lines as you do today. It takes a few days to kick in. All of that stuff, I think, gets missed in a lot of appointments. And then follow-up. I'm super diligent about following up with patients. If they're a new patient and they're getting something done, everybody comes back in a couple of weeks to make sure they like everything. I send every single patient before and afters from my personal cell phone. And so everybody has my phone number. I just think removing the barrier and becoming a resource for people is really what set us apart.
And I think demographically, you fit right in a demographic that those things that you want are things that the patients are going to want, and the you're recruiting you, right? I mean, the kind of moms had a couple kids. I mean, not to say you're not recruiting men and other people as well, that, or you're open to treating anyone, but if we're getting back to who's going to know you, like you, trust you, build a relationship with you over many, many years, I would think foundationally those are the relationships you want. And then you'd love for them to bring their mom in, and in 25 years you'd love for them to bring their daughter in, right? And build that relationship in the community.
Yeah, I'm in it for the long game. It was funny when we first opened I was such an integral part of overseeing everything, and the HVAC guy came out and was replacing something in our unit. And I was like, he said something like, I didn't bring the right filter, but I can make this one work if you want me to just shove it in. And I was like, no, 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 buddy. Like, I'm literally going to be in this building for 30 years. So go order the right filter or whatever you're doing, and please make it right. Because this is not a short-term place for me.
It's funny to think about. Not, and also my husband's company happens to own the building, so don't short us, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really unique way to do that. I think other plastic surgeons, one thing I kind of got out of that scenario is you may be able to find an investor in your facility, but not necessarily in your business. So I think we go to banks become our partners in opening businesses, and they make a percentage of our profit. It's just, we call it interest. It's not a distribution, but it's still interest paid to them. Whatever the spread between what we borrow and what we pay back is what they make, right? So, but in this case, yeah, for somebody, there are plenty of people out there looking for real estate investment, and knowing they have a plastic surgeon that theoretically would be a good payer, and somebody that was going to be in that long term. I think the only thing I would say to you, Lauren, is at some point, 15 years later, you may begrudge, but in your case, you won't, because you get the money in this pocket or that pocket, doesn't really matter which way it comes in. So, yeah, so for the rest of you that have spouses in real estate development, maybe think of them. But no, if you had a friend down the street, I was just thinking about that. If I was to open another business and I wanted to do something owner operated, perhaps I could get a business partner in the building, but not in the operation of the business. Smart way to go about it.
Yes, I'm very fortunate, but I also don't want to downplay the amount of work that went into it. There's been a lot of sweat that's gone into it. So I married the right person, and, out of happenstance, and I have the right personality to go do all this. So.
Yeah. And you made it easier for the builder in a lot of ways, because you made decisions. You knew what you wanted, or you researched and figured out what you wanted. So it was really built to suit.
Yeah, I don't know if I made his life easier. I made some very particular design choices that were quite challenging, I think, but it all turned out.
Yeah. When you are spending this huge amount of time with patients, and listening to them and helping them build these plans and come up with, are you asking them, Raja and I that do a lot of podcasting together or a lot of market strategy stuff, um, often talk about reciprocity, patients willing to give you something in return. And I feel like when you're giving so much of your time to a patient, it's easier to ask for things too, whether that's before and after pictures or patient reviews. I just want to talk about like branding, building your business. Um, it's hard for me to really think of branding with a new business, because when I think of branding, I think of like Coca-Cola and Target, but I guess branding can be done in a smaller area as well. So anyway, I'm just kind of wondering how you leverage, you're building these great foundations because you're putting the time in and you have the time and you realize that. But how are you getting patients to reciprocate and help you build the practice?
That's a great question. Most people, when they look at our practice on Google, are unable to figure out how I have so many 5-star Google reviews after only 8 months in business. And you hit the nail on the head. I provide such great value to patients, I think, that by the time they've gotten even as simple as a neuromodulator treatment, 2-week follow-up, and me texting them their before and afters and thank you for coming in. Oh, and by the way, I write every single brand new patient a handwritten thank you note after they come in. That by the time I ask them, hey, would you be interested in leaving us a review? Universally, people say, oh my gosh, yes, please send me the link. The return on that is probably 50-50, but that's still way higher than most asks in most practices. So I feel very fortunate. I never expect anything from our patients, and I never forcefully ask anything. I politely ask, would you love to leave us a review? If so, I can send you the link. Oh, by the way, I love your before and afters. I'm so proud of the work that we've done. Would you be willing to let me share them online? If they say no, no hard feelings. I know it's a very intimate place that I work on, their face. And then I don't ever ask people to refer their friends, but they inevitably do because they've had such a great experience with my team. And it's not just me, like the 2 nurses I have and the patient care coordinator that I have are amazing at their jobs. They're able to spend a lot of time and we really get to know every patient. And so each patient hopefully walks away with the feeling that we know them, we care about them, and we want the best for them.
Well, and look, you're setting the tone. I mean, I love to give staff credit where credit's due as well. But I think because you're not tasking your staff to fill up your consults like a mill running through, and you're leaving the amount of time that you need per patient appointment and all of that, they're able to do what you said as well. And then if the phones are getting bogged down, it sounds like you're in a position to hire someone else to handle that. So you're making sure that they're not burdened beyond not being able to give one-on-one attention to a patient when they're there in the office.
Yeah, I think when I sense that we're getting a little bit pushed, that's when I hired the other nurse. And that's when I hired the front desk person. It's like, as soon as you get that feeling, then it's already too late. You need to hire someone soon.
When you you named your practice Face, I'm wondering, are you doing anything below the shoulders?
Nope.
Do you have plans to?
Nope.
I wouldn't figure you would, but at some point, when I was in laser distribution, I named a company West Coast Laser. And 2 years later, somebody from Virginia called me and I thought that was a stupid name. But at the time, the West Coast seemed gigantic, huge. But you're not, so the body sculpting and those types of things are just not of interest to you.
Maybe I'll eat my words in 5 years, but I love the idea of being just so specialized and being known in the Midwest as the facial plastics place to go. I think there's so much opportunity for improvement even incrementally in every little single thing I do and my staff does, that even when we start to get bored in the face, which I just don't see that happening, you can get better. I mean, we're in such a great world technology wise that things constantly are coming out, new things here, new things there, improvements here, different technologies. And so we're in a world where things don't get stagnant, and I love being a niche practice.
Yeah, and I body's tough. Body is really, really tough. It's not, there's so many different variables. Face, if you look at aesthetics and you look at the longevity that we've had in aesthetics, IPL is still around for a reason. Brown spots and redness in the face are still bothersome. And yeah, Dr. Umstattd, you're totally right. It's like, and now we have picosecond technology. We have other types of technologies. There's topicals. There's exosome if you buy into that stuff. There's PRP. There's so much coming out. I do think we're able to offer patients much more consistent results in the surgical realm, and certainly in the above the shoulders realm. As we start getting into fat and hormones and weight and these things, there's a lot of more room for patient unhappiness. And I just, in your approach from the very beginning, I think you'd be really frustrated, because I think it would be beyond your tolerance level of, you know, how much off perfect can it be. In body sculpting, I think it's quite a bit off perfect, and in the face it's not as much.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see where the future takes us, but I just have zero interest in going below the shoulders at this point.
Yeah, and look, and you're doing so much. You have so much going on over there. Testament to how much your practice has grown in the last 8 months. This building of relationships with patients, the referral business that you're already seeing, and congratulations. I mean, opening that practice from scratch, getting to the point now where you have your family there, you are practicing medicine the way that you want, and you're really in control of your own destiny. I mean, my people call it chutzpah. They say it took a lot of chutzpah to get to where you are. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a lot of good mentors, you know, in training, and my husband and his family are just invaluable when it comes to business acumen. So
great to reach out and find those mentors. If you don't have them in your life, you need to go find them in your life. Dr. Umstattd, I want to thank you so much for sharing a look into your practice, what it took to get started, your approach to patient care and the amount of time you're taking, the using reciprocity to ask patients to help with reviews and those other branding activities to grow the practice. If there's other physicians that wanted to reach out to you, I know you participate in the Facebook group, so that would be a great way. You could just tag Dr. Umstattd there. I will let her spell her last name for you so that you can do it online. But can you share, do you have a Instagram handle or a phone number? What's the best way or a patient in the Midwest that's looking for facial plastic surgery or facial work? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
I'm all over the place. It's Lauren Umstattd. Our last name is very unique. It's Umstattd. So when you spell it out, if it looks wrong, it's probably right. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, all the platforms. Our practice is called Face Leawood. It's located in the greater Kansas City area. For potential patients, you can text us at 913-971-0800. Call us at 913-608-8223. And my personal email, even if you want to reach out, it's Dr. Lauren, DRLAUREN at faceleawood.com.
So for all the you that are listening to this that didn't get a chance to write that down, if you go to businessofesthetics.org and pull up this podcast with Dr. Lauren Umstattd, we will have all of that information listed for you. So just go to businessofesthetics.org. And if you want to reach out online again, Dr. Lauren's last name, Umstattd. So thank you again, Dr. Umstattd. Thank you to the Business of Aesthetic community. If you love this, please share it. We need new podcast guests. If you, Dr. Umstattd, if you have mentors, typically physician mentors, but even business mentors, if those of you have colleagues that you think are doing something unique or doing right, or you just love to hear from them, please go to businessofesthetics.org, shoot us a note with that physician information. We will reach out to them and see if they want to be a part of our podcast. But thank you as we continue to learn from each other. We appreciate you, Dr. Umstattd, for being part of our group and taking the time this evening to share your story with us.
Thanks for having me on, and thanks for all the great information that you guys put out.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Business of Aesthetics podcast series, brought to you by our gold sponsors, MRP, Leawood, and Equa Marketing, and silver sponsors, Lengia Law, Eilis Works, and Pronox. Would you like to join our growing group of aesthetic industry experts and get featured on the Business of Aesthetics podcast? Or do you know someone who would love to share their strategies for growth in the aesthetics business, providing quality patient care, or their clinical expertise? Head on over to www.businessofaesthetics.org/podcast/show and apply to be featured as a guest on the show. Remember to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen. If you would like to engage with today's or any of our past speakers, join our Facebook group or LinkedIn group by searching for Business of Aesthetics. Thank you and have a great day.